The evening light filtered through the expansive windows of Le Petit Sol, one of the most prestigious restaurants in Gangnam. Soojin sat at the center of a large table, surrounded by 8 of her closest friends who had gathered to celebrate her 28th birthday. Her fingers kept brushing against her phone screen, checking for messages while trying to maintain her composure during the celebration. And if you want a handsome CEO in your life and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet conversation of other diners and the subtle clinking of wine glasses. Soojin's friends chatted animatedly around her, but their voices seemed distant as she focused on her phone, waiting for any sign from Hyunsuk. He had promised to join them by 7:30 p.m. It was now 8:45 p.m. Minji, her best friend since college, noticed Soojin's distraction and placed a hand on her shoulder. "He's probably stuck in traffic," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe her own words. Soojin nodded, forcing a smile as the waiter brought out another round of appetizers. The notification sound from her phone cut through the ambient noise. Soojin's heart raced as she checked the message from Hyunsuk. "Sorry, can't make it. Something came up at work. We'll make it up to you tomorrow." The message was brief, without any explanation or birthday wishes. Soojin excused herself from the table, heading to the bathroom to compose herself. The evening continued with her friends trying their best to lift her spirits, but the empty chair beside her served as a constant reminder of Hyunsuk's absence. After dinner, her friends insisted on accompanying her home, but Soojin declined, claiming she needed some time alone. The taxi ride to her apartment in the Mapo district was silent, with Seoul's nightlife creating a blur of neon lights outside the window. As she approached her apartment door, Soojin heard muffled sounds from inside. Her heart rate quickened. Perhaps Hyunsuk had planned a surprise after all. She had given him a spare key months ago, trusting him completely. Using her keycard, she opened the door quietly, wanting to catch him in the act of setting up whatever surprise he had planned. The lights in the living room were off, but she could see movement in the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, casting a strip of light into the hallway. Soojin's excitement turned to confusion as she heard a woman's laugh, one she didn't recognize. Standing frozen in the hallway, Soojin's mind refused to process what was happening. She pushed the bedroom door open, and the scene before her shattered any remaining illusions. Hyunsuk was in their bed with another woman, both scrambling to cover themselves as the door swung open.
"Sojina,"
Hyunsuk exclaimed, his face a mixture of shock and guilt. The woman, younger than Soojin and wearing only Hyunsuk's dress shirt, quickly gathered her clothes. Soojin didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, a cold numbness spread through her body as she watched the scene unfold. The woman hurriedly dressed and slipped past her, mumbling apologies. Hyunsuk attempted to explain, throwing out excuses about feeling distant and stressed at work, but his words fell on deaf ears. "Get out," Soojin said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. When Hyunsuk tried to approach her, she stepped back. "Get out now." The next morning, Soojin called in sick to her current job at a small marketing firm. She spent the day mechanically removing all traces of Hyunsuk from her apartment. Photos, gifts, the spare key he had used to betray her trust. Each item went into a large box that she left outside her door for him to collect. Over the next week, she threw herself into job applications, determined to make a complete change. Her extensive experience in digital marketing and project management caught the attention of several companies, but one stood out: TechVision Korea, a rapidly growing technology company known for its innovative workplace culture. The interview process was rigorous, consisting of multiple rounds with different department heads. Soojin approached each interview with determination, channeling her emotional pain into professional ambition. When the offer letter arrived 2 weeks later, she saw it as more than just a job opportunity. It was her chance to rebuild her life from the ground up. As she submitted her resignation to her current employer, Soojin blocked Hyunsuk's number and removed him from all social media. The betrayal had taught her a harsh lesson about trust, but it had also shown her that she was stronger than she realized. With her new position at TechVision Korea starting in 2 weeks, Soojin focused on the future, determined to leave the past behind. The gleaming glass facade of TechVision Korea's headquarters reflected the morning sun as Soojin walked through the revolving doors. The lobby bustled with employees, their employee badges displaying the company's distinctive blue and silver logo. Security directed her to the orientation room, where she received her own badge and company laptop. During the new employee orientation, the door opened quietly and the room's atmosphere shifted. Jaemin, TechVision's CEO, walked in with an air of casual authority. At 35, he was remarkably young for his position, having founded the company 7 years ago. He wore a well-fitted navy suit without a tie, embodying the company's modern approach to corporate culture. "Welcome to TechVision," Jaemin addressed the group of new employees, his voice carrying a warmth that contradicted the typical cold corporate demeanor. "I make it a point to meet every new team member personally." His eyes met Soojin's briefly as he scanned the room, and she noticed they crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. After the general introduction, Jaemin approached each new employee individually. When he reached Soojin's desk, he referenced specific points from her interview portfolio. "Your campaign strategy for the startup client was impressive," he said, demonstrating that he had personally reviewed her application. "We need that kind of innovative thinking here." The interaction left Soojin feeling noticed in a way that was both professional and encouraging. Throughout her first week, she immersed herself in learning TechVision's systems and processes, determined to prove herself worthy of the CEO's initial praise. During her second week, Soojin presented her first project proposal during a department meeting. The project aimed to revamp the company's social media strategy, incorporating AI-driven analytics to better target their audience. As she explained her concept, she noticed Jaemin had slipped into the back of the conference room. "What about privacy concerns?" Jaemin asked when she finished, his question direct but not confrontational. "How do we balance data collection with user trust?" Soojin felt her heart rate increase, but she maintained her composure. "I've incorporated a transparent opt-in system," she explained, pulling up additional slides she had prepared for potential questions. "Users have complete control over their data sharing preferences, and we incentivize participation through personalized benefits." Jaemin nodded approvingly, and a slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That's exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. Let's set up a meeting to discuss implementation details." The following day, Soojin found herself in Jaemin's office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline. Rather than sitting behind his desk, he chose to join her at the casual seating area, creating a more collaborative atmosphere. "Tell me more about your long-term vision for this project," he encouraged, leaning forward slightly as she spoke. His questions were challenging but constructive, pushing her to think beyond her initial proposals. When she struggled with a particular technical aspect, Jaemin didn't dismiss her ideas. Instead, he pulled up relevant market research on his tablet, sharing insights that helped strengthen her proposal. "You have good instincts," he said. "You just need the right data to back them up." The meeting stretched from its scheduled 30 minutes to nearly 2 hours. They moved from discussing the project to sharing their views on industry trends and the future of digital marketing. Jaemin's enthusiasm for innovation was contagious, and Soojin found herself speaking more freely than she had in months. As she left his office, Soojin felt a growing sense of professional confidence. The interaction had shown her that her ideas had value and that she was capable of holding her own in discussions with senior leadership. For the first time since the incident with Hyunsuk, she felt truly seen for her capabilities rather than being defined by her personal life. That evening, as Soojin worked late to refine her proposal based on their discussion, Jaemin stopped by her desk. "Don't stay too late," he advised, placing a coffee on her desk. "Fresh minds have better ideas." The gesture was simple but thoughtful, demonstrating an awareness of his employees' well-being that went beyond typical corporate leadership. Over the next few weeks, Soojin's interactions with Jaemin became more frequent. What started as project discussions evolved into regular conversations about work, industry trends, and gradually, life in general. They often found themselves being the last ones in the office, their discussions extending beyond traditional work hours. One evening, as they reviewed progress on the social media strategy implementation, Jaemin suggested they move their discussion to the office cafe on the ground floor. The space was almost empty at that hour, creating an atmosphere that felt more personal than their usual office meetings. "You haven't eaten dinner yet, have you?" Jaemin asked, ordering food for both of them without waiting for an answer. He seemed to have noticed her habit of skipping meals when focused on work. The casual observation showed an attention to detail that caught Soojin off guard. During their meal, Jaemin shared stories about founding TechVision. "Everyone thought I was crazy to leave a stable corporate job," he said, stirring his coffee. "My parents didn't speak to me for months." His candor about his struggles made him seem more human, less like the untouchable CEO figure she had initially perceived. Soojin found herself relaxing in his presence, the professional barrier slowly dissolving into something more comfortable. When he asked about her previous work experiences, she carefully avoided mentioning Hyunsuk, focusing instead on her professional achievements. However, Jaemin seemed to sense there was more to her story. "Something made you choose TechVision," he observed quietly. "Most people don't leave stable jobs without a reason." The statement hung in the air, an invitation rather than a demand for information. Soojin considered her response carefully, not wanting to appear unprofessional by sharing personal details. But Jaemin's open expression and genuine interest made her feel safe enough to share a portion of her truth. "I needed a change," she admitted. "Sometimes personal setbacks can be catalysts for professional growth." Jaemin nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I started TechVision after a failed engagement," he shared unexpectedly. "She couldn't understand why I wanted more than a comfortable corporate life. The breakup was painful, but it pushed me to pursue my dreams." This revelation shifted something in their dynamic. Soojin found herself seeing Jaemin not just as her boss or even a mentor, but as someone who understood personal struggle and growth. Their conversations began to flow more naturally, touching on topics beyond work while maintaining professional boundaries. During team meetings, Soojin noticed how Jaemin would seek her opinion, valuing her input on various projects. His trust in her abilities boosted her confidence, helping her find her voice in the corporate environment. Other employees began to notice her rising influence, and she quickly became known as someone who had the CEO's ear. However, this growing closeness to Jaemin brought complicated feelings. Soojin caught herself looking forward to their interactions more than she should, anticipating his reactions to her ideas, and feeling a flutter in her stomach when he smiled at her across the conference room. These feelings both excited and terrified her. The memory of Hyunsuk's betrayal was still fresh, making her question her judgment. When Jaemin's hand accidentally brushed hers while reaching for a document, the brief contact sent a jolt through her that she immediately tried to suppress. She had built walls around her heart for a reason, and letting them down seemed dangerous, especially with someone who held such power over her professional life. Yet Jaemin's consistent support and genuine interest in her growth made it difficult to maintain those walls. Unlike Hyunsuk, who had always made her feel slightly inadequate, Jaemin seemed to see her potential and actively worked to help her realize it. During a particularly challenging project, when Soojin was struggling with self-doubt, Jaemin pulled her aside. "You're capable of more than you give yourself credit for," he said, his voice firm but kind. "I wouldn't have approved your proposals if I didn't believe in your abilities." These words, spoken with such conviction, made something shift inside Soojin. The professional admiration she felt for Jaemin was evolving into something more personal, more frightening. Yet the fear of repeating past mistakes kept her from acknowledging these feelings, even to herself. Hyunsuk's sudden reappearance in Soojin's life came through a series of messages, each one more urgent than the last. "I miss you," the first one read, followed by, "I've changed, and can we meet? Just to talk." The messages arrived during a crucial presentation preparation, making her hands shake as she tried to focus on her slides. During her lunch break, she found herself reading through his messages repeatedly. Hyunsuk's words seemed sincere, talking about therapy sessions and personal growth. He mentioned specific moments from their relationship, reminding her of happier times before the betrayal. Despite her resolution to move forward, these memories stirred something inside her. "Your presentation draft looks distracted," Jaemin commented later that afternoon, setting down the proposal she'd submitted. He didn't ask directly what was wrong, but his concerned expression invited confidence. They were alone in the conference room, the evening sun casting long shadows across the table. "Sometimes the past doesn't stay where we leave it," Sujin replied, trying to maintain her professional composure. She hadn't told anyone at TechVision about Hyunsuk, but her distraction must have been obvious. Jaemin leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "The past has a way of looking better than it actually was," he said carefully. "That's why we need to focus on building something better in the present." The words weren't just about work, and they both knew it. That evening, Hyunsuk waited outside the TechVision building. Sujin's heart jumped when she saw him, but not in the way it used to. He looked the same, tall, well-dressed, with that charming smile that had once meant everything to her. "Just 5 minutes," he pleaded when she tried to walk past him. Those 5 minutes turned into an hour at a nearby coffee shop. Hyunsuk spoke about his regrets, his therapy sessions, how losing her had made him realize what truly mattered. "We could start fresh," he suggested, reaching for her hand across the table. "I'm not the same person who hurt you." Sujin pulled her hand away, but doubt had already crept in. The familiar way he spoke, the shared history between them, the comfort of knowing someone completely, it all tugged at her heart. Yet something felt different. Perhaps she was the one who had changed. The next day, Jaemin found her in the office early, staring blankly at her computer screen. Without asking, he placed a coffee on her desk and sat in the chair beside her. "Want to talk about what's really bothering you?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. The question broke something inside her. Sujin found herself telling him everything, about finding Hyunsuk with another woman on her birthday, about starting at TechVision as an escape, about his sudden reappearance. Jaemin listened without interruption, his presence steady and comforting. "You don't owe him anything," Jaemin said when she finished. "Not your time, not your thoughts, and certainly not a second chance. Focus on your growth, your achievements, your future." His words carried weight, not just as her CEO, but as someone who had become important to her. Over the next few days, Hyunsuk's messages continued, but Sujin found them affecting her less and less. She threw herself into her work, drawing strength from her accomplishments and the supportive environment at TechVision. During meetings, she noticed how Jaemin's presence made her feel secure rather than anxious, confident rather than uncertain. When Hyunsuk showed up again, this time with flowers, Sujin's response surprised even herself. "I'm not interested in starting over," she told him firmly. "The person you knew, the one who would accept your excuses and try to make things work, she's gone. I've grown beyond that relationship." The rejection seemed to shock Hyunsuk, who had clearly expected their history to work in his favor. "Is there someone else?" he asked, his tone carrying a hint of accusation. Sujin thought briefly of Jaemin, of their growing closeness, but she kept that to herself. During a routine data review, Sujin discovered irregularities in some client accounts that seemed to connect back to her old marketing firm, specifically to projects Hyunsuk had managed. The numbers didn't add up, suggesting a pattern of fraudulent reporting and misappropriated funds that could impact TechVision's current partnerships. She sat in her office late into the night, cross-referencing data and following paper trails. The evidence pointed to a sophisticated scheme. Hyunsuk had been manipulating marketing metrics and diverting funds through shell companies. Worse, some of these companies now had contracts with TechVision through third-party vendors. Her hands trembled as she compiled the information. This discovery explained Hyunsuk's sudden reappearance in her life. He must have known TechVision was getting close to uncovering his scheme. His attempts to reconcile weren't about love. They were about damage control. Jaemin noticed her distraction during the next morning's executive meeting. After everyone left, he closed the conference room door and sat beside her. "Something's weighing on you," he said, not a question but an observation. "Whatever it is, we can handle it together." Sujin pulled out her tablet and showed him the evidence she'd gathered. "Hyunsuk, my ex-boyfriend," she explained, watching Jaemin's expression shift as he understood the implications. "He's involved in a fraud scheme that could affect TechVision's reputation." Instead of the anger or disappointment she expected, Jaemin's face showed concern. For her, not the company. "This must be difficult for you," he said softly, his hand resting near hers on the table. "But you did the right thing bringing this to light." That evening, they had dinner in Jaemin's office, discussing how to handle the situation. The lights of Seoul sparkled through the windows as they worked. Through various scenarios, Soojin found herself watching Jaemin as he spoke, admiring how he approached the problem with both strategic thinking and ethical consideration. "We need to report this to the authorities," he concluded. "But I want you to know that you're not alone in this. We'll handle it carefully, protecting both the company and you." The warmth in his voice made Soojin's heart race. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, the professional boundary between them seemed to blur. Jaemin leaned forward slightly, then caught himself, maintaining their professional distance. As they worked late into the night, Soojin received a text from Hyunsuk. "We need to talk. It's about your new company." The threat was subtle but clear. She showed the message to Jaemin, whose jaw tightened visibly. "He's trying to manipulate you again," Jaemin said, his voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. "Don't let him. You're stronger than his games." His faith in her stirred something deep inside Soojin, making her realize how much his opinion had come to matter. Later, as they prepared to leave, Jaemin suggested dinner at a nearby restaurant. The setting was intimate, with soft lighting and quiet jazz playing in the background. Their conversation drifted from the scandal to more personal topics, and Soojin found herself opening up about her fears and hopes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just about the scandal, but about trusting my judgment again. About letting people in." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Jaemin reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "Trust isn't about never getting hurt," he said softly. "It's about choosing to believe in something or someone despite the risks." The moment was interrupted by another message from Hyunsuk, this one more desperate. "Don't make me do something we'll both regret." The threat cast a shadow over their evening, reminding Soojin of the difficult decisions ahead. The quarterly board meeting room buzzed with anticipation as Soojin prepared to present her team's latest project. She had spent weeks perfecting a revolutionary digital marketing strategy that combined AI-driven analytics with personalized user experiences. Jaemin sat at the head of the table, his presence both reassuring and nerve-wracking. "Our new platform doesn't just track user behavior," Soojin explained, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "It anticipates needs and creates customized experiences while maintaining strict privacy protocols." As she spoke, the board members leaned forward, clearly engaged. Jaemin's subtle nod encouraged her to continue. The presentation was a triumph. Board members peppered her with questions, each answer demonstrating her deep understanding of both technology and market dynamics. Jaemin's eyes showed pride as she handled even the most challenging inquiries with confidence. "This is exactly the kind of innovation TechVision needs," one board member commented. "Impressive work, Ms. Kim." The praise should have felt like a victory, but the weight of Hyunsuk's scandal hung heavy in her mind. After the meeting, while others filed out, Jaemin touched her elbow lightly. "You were brilliant in there," he said quietly. "Don't let anything diminish this moment." His words carried a double meaning. They both knew what shadows lurked behind her success. Back at her desk, Soojin found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a note, evidence of your involvement in previous projects. Would be a shame if TechVision discovered their rising stars' past indiscretions. Her hands shook as she read the words. The USB contained documents suggesting she had been complicit in Hyunsuk's schemes at her previous company. The fabrications were clever, weaving truth with lies in a way that could destroy her credibility if released. That evening, while most employees had gone home, Soojin sat in her office, staring at the cityscape through her window. The threatening note lay on her desk like a ticking bomb. Her phone buzzed with another message from an unknown number. "Your career or your conscience? Choose wisely." Jaemin found her there, still wrestling with her decision. Without a word, he closed her office door and sat across from her. "Tell me," he said simply, his voice gentle but firm. As Soojin explained about the USB and threats, Jaemin's expression darkened. "He's desperate," he observed. Desperate people make mistakes. We can use that. The "we" in his statement made her heart skip. She wasn't alone in this fight. I've worked so hard to build this new life, Sujin whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Everything I've achieved here at TechVision is genuine, Jaemin interrupted firmly. Your success is based on your talent and dedication. Don't let him make you doubt that. He moved closer, his presence providing strength she desperately needed. The office grew darker as evening settled in, city lights creating a warm glow through the windows. They sat together, discussing strategies and possibilities, their professional relationship deepening into something more complex with each passing moment. Whatever you decide, Jaemin said finally, I trust your judgment. But remember, running from the truth never leads to freedom. His words echoed in her mind long after he left her office. That night, as Sujin headed home, she noticed a familiar figure watching from across the street. Hyunsuk's presence was no longer threatening, it was desperate, pathetic even. She realized he held power over her only if she gave it to him. The next few days became a careful balance of maintaining her regular work duties while conducting a covert investigation. Sujin created a secure folder on her personal laptop, methodically documenting every piece of evidence she could find about Hyunsuk's fraudulent activities. Working late into the night, she discovered a pattern in the financial records. Hyunsuk had been clever, but he left traces, small discrepancies in reporting dates, inconsistent client signatures, and irregular transaction patterns that only someone familiar with his work style would notice. The breakthrough came when she found an old recording from a client meeting. It was standard practice at her previous company to record important sessions for documentation. In this particular recording, Hyunsuk could be heard clearly discussing alternative reporting methods with a client who had later been implicated in several financial scandals. As she listened to the recording for the third time, her office door opened quietly. Jaemin entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might need this, he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. It's past midnight. I found something, Sujin said, removing her earphones. She hesitated before playing the recording, sharing it would make everything real, irreversible. Jaemin listened intently, his expression growing darker with each damning statement. This is significant evidence, he said after the recording ended. But using it comes with risks. Are you prepared for what might happen? The question hung heavy in the air. Using the recording meant exposing not just Hyunsuk, but potentially damaging the reputation of her former company. Several innocent colleagues could be affected. The weight of this responsibility made her hands tremble as she closed her laptop. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, vulnerability creeping into her voice. So many people could get hurt. Jaemin moved closer, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Sometimes protecting the truth means making difficult choices, he said softly. But hiding it only gives power to those who abuse trust. Over the next few days, Sujin withdrew into herself, working mechanically through her regular tasks while her mind churned with possibilities. Her team noticed her distraction, but attributed it to the pressure of recent successes. The recording felt like a loaded gun in her possession. She could destroy Hyunsuk's career with it, but the collateral damage would be significant. Every time her phone buzzed with another threatening message from him, her finger hovered over the email that would send the evidence to the proper authorities. Jaemin watched her internal struggle from a distance, offering silent support but never pushing her to act. His restraint made her question her own hesitation. Was she protecting others, or was she still letting fear control her decisions? During a particularly difficult moment, when another threatening message arrived, Jaemin found her in the office garden. You don't owe him your silence, he said, sitting beside her on the bench. And you don't owe anyone protection from their own choices. I keep thinking about the day I found him with that woman, Sujin confessed. I was so angry then, but now I'm just tired of letting him control my life. The annual TechVision Industry Conference transformed the company's ground floor into a networking hub. Executives and industry leaders mingled among interactive displays showcasing the latest innovations. Sujin, presenting her successful marketing platform, felt confident until she spotted Hyun-suk among the attendees. He wasn't supposed to be there. His company hadn't been invited, yet somehow he'd managed to gain entry. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging business cards, slowly making his way toward her presentation area. "Impressive work," Hyun-suk said when he finally reached her station, his voice carrying that familiar mix of charm and condescension. "Though I wonder if the board knows about your creative accounting methods at your previous position." Soo-jin maintained her composure, aware of the watching crowd. "Is that why you're here? To threaten me at my own company's event?" "I'm here to offer you a way out," he replied quietly. "Delete the evidence you've gathered, and I'll make sure your involvement in past projects stays buried. We could even start fresh. Give us another chance." The manipulation was so obvious now. The way he mixed threats with promises, how he tried to create doubt about her own integrity. Before she could respond, Jaemin appeared beside her. "Is there a problem here?" Jaemin asked, his voice pleasant but his eyes hard as he assessed Hyun-suk. Hyun-suk's smile faltered slightly. "Just congratulating an old colleague on her success. Soo-jin and I go way back." "Back to when you were manipulating client data?" Jaemin's question was quiet, meant only for their ears, but it hit like a thunderbolt. Hyun-suk's facade cracked momentarily, showing the panic beneath. Soo-jin grabbed Jaemin's arm as he took a step toward Hyun-suk. "Not here," she whispered. "There are too many people watching." The tension between the two men was palpable. Hyun-suk recovered quickly, his smile returning. "I should mingle with other guests. Think about what I said, Soo-jin. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed." After he left, Jaemin turned to Soo-jin, concern evident in his expression. "You don't have to handle this alone. Let me help you end this." "If this becomes public, it won't just affect him," Soo-jin explained. "The entire industry will be watching. TechVision's reputation is not more important than doing what's right," Jaemin interrupted. "And it's certainly not more important than your peace of mind." The rest of the event passed in a blur. Soo-jin maintained her professional demeanor, but her mind kept returning to Hyun-suk's threats and Jaemin's words. The contrast between the two men had never been clearer, one trying to control her through fear, the other empowering her to face that fear. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Jaemin found her collecting her presentation materials. "He won't stop," he sighed. "Dikkatli. People like him never do. They just keep pushing until someone stands up to them." "I know," Soo-jin replied, finally accepting the truth she'd been avoiding. "I need to make a decision." In Jaemin's private office, Soo-jin finally allowed herself to voice her deepest fears. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows as she sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just of Hyun-suk's threats, but of what exposing this might do to everyone involved. The other employees at my old company, our clients here at TechVision, my own career." Jaemin listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "Fear is natural," he said, leaning forward. "But you've already shown more courage than you realize. Coming to TechVision, rebuilding your life, discovering the truth, these weren't easy choices." "What if I'm wrong?" she asked. "What if the evidence isn't enough?" "It is," Jaemin said firmly. "And you're not alone in this. I've already had our legal team quietly reviewing everything you've gathered. They believe we have a solid case." This revelation stunned Soo-jin. "You've been preparing?" "I trust your judgment," he replied simply. "I wanted to be ready when you made your decision." The knowledge that he had been quietly supporting her, preparing for this moment, filled Soo-jin with unexpected strength. She pulled out the USB drive containing all her evidence, including the damning recording. "I need to do this," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Not just for myself, but for everyone else he might hurt in the future." Jaemin nodded, pride evident in his expression. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're concerned about potential vulnerabilities in our partnerships. It would be the perfect time to present what you've found." As they prepared for the meeting, organizing the evidence and planning the presentation, Soo-jin felt a shift in her relationship with Jaemin. His unwavering support, his belief in her integrity, had created a bond that went beyond professional admiration. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said softly as they finished their preparation, "remember that you're doing this because it's right, not because you're seeking revenge." That night, as Sujin left the office, her phone buzzed with one final message from Hyunsuk. "Last chance. Don't throw away everything you've built." For the first time, his words held no power over her. She deleted the message without responding and headed home to prepare for the next day's confrontation. Morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. The boardroom filled with executives and key stakeholders. Hyunsuk, invited under the pretense of a partnership review, sat confidently near the middle of the table. As Sujin took her place at the front of the room, she caught Jaemin's encouraging nod. The time for fear and hesitation was over. She had the truth on her side, and finally, she was ready to use it. The boardroom hummed with tension as Sujin stood at the podium, her presentation materials ready. Before she could begin, Jaemin raised his hand, requesting the floor. Hyunsuk sat with an air of smug confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. "Before we discuss partnerships," Jaemin announced, "there's a matter of corporate integrity we need to address." He nodded to his assistant, who dimmed the lights and activated the large screen behind Sujin. The video that began playing wasn't what Sujin had prepared. Instead, it was a meticulously compiled presentation of evidence, financial records, email trails, and surveillance footage showing Hyunsuk's fraudulent activities. The centerpiece was her recording, enhanced and time-stamped, playing with crystal clarity through the room's speakers. Hyunsuk's face drained of color as his own voice filled the room, detailing illegal financial arrangements. He half rose from his chair, but security personnel had quietly positioned themselves near the doors. The evidence continued to unfold: doctored reports, falsified client signatures, and most damaging, proof of his recent attempts to blackmail Sujin. Each piece had been carefully verified and annotated by TechVision's legal team. "We've already submitted this evidence to the appropriate authorities," Jaemin stated, his voice calm but firm. "They're waiting outside to take your statement, Mr. Park." Hyunsuk's composed facade crumbled completely. "You can't prove anything," he sputtered, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "Sujin was involved in all of these projects. She's just as guilty. We have sworn statements from your former employees," Jaemin interrupted, "confirming Ms. Kim's non-involvement in your schemes. Your attempts to blackmail her with falsified evidence have only strengthened our case." Sujin watched as two police officers entered the boardroom. The man who had once held such power over her emotions now looked small and desperate as they approached him. "You planned this," Hyunsuk accused, looking at Sujin with a mixture of anger and disbelief as the officers began reading him his rights. "You pretended to be afraid. Let me think I had the upper hand." "No," Sujin interrupted, finding her voice. "I was afraid. But I learned that being afraid doesn't mean you have to let fear control you." As Hyunsuk was led away, the boardroom erupted in discussion. Jaemin called for order, quickly outlining the steps TechVision had taken to protect client interests and prevent any impact on current projects. In the chaos that followed, Sujin felt a profound sense of relief. She caught Jaemin's eye across the room, and the look they shared spoke volumes. He had believed in her, supported her, and helped her find the strength to face her past. Later that evening, after the press releases had been issued and the initial storm had calmed, Sujin found herself alone with Jaemin in his office. The city lights spread out below them, a carpet of stars mirroring the ones above. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing he would understand all she meant to convey. Jaemin moved closer, the professional distance between them finally dissolving. "You did this yourself," he said softly. "You just needed to believe in your own strength." As they stood together, looking out over the city, Sujin realized that what she had found at TechVision wasn't just a new job or a fresh start. She had found her courage, her voice, and perhaps most unexpectedly, a love that empowered rather than diminished her. The story had come full circle, from a betrayal that had nearly broken her to a triumph that had made her stronger. And as Jaemin's hand found hers in the darkness, Sujin knew that this wasn't just an ending, but a beginning.